All praise is due to Allah, the Lord, cherisher, nourisher, sustainer, and master of the universe, the most gracious, the most beneficent, the most merciful. Ya Allah, it is only you that we worship, and it's your guidance that we seek. Ya Allah, keep us in the straight path. Ya Allah, show us the choice of blessings. Ya Allah, show us with your mercy. Ya Allah, guide us. Greetings, salam, salutations on our beloved Nabi Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. 8 minutes past 9 Central African time on this beautiful Friday evening, the 4th of April 2025, the 6th of Shawwal 1446. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to Let's Chat on Radio Al Ansar with myself, Faisal MJ Sulaiman. Yes, it is a beautiful Friday evening here in Durban, and of course, we've got a bit of rain. It's nice and cool, and a good reprieve from the warm days that we've been having. Tonight's show will be in two parts. The first part we'll be discussing parenthood, and in the second part we have something very interesting as well, and that is horse riding in Islamic tradition. But right now we're going to start off by discussing parenthood, and we're going to say good evening to Dr. Ken Resnick. And Dr. Resnick, thank you very much for joining me on the program this evening.
Good evening, Faisal. Thanks very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
Absolute pleasure. It's been a while since I spoke to you, but
Yeah.
I always enjoy our conversations.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Parenthood is one of the most rewarding yet challenging journeys in life. From the first cry to the first steps, the late night worries to the heartwarming moments of pride, being a parent is more than just a title. It's a lifelong commitment of love, sacrifice, and guidance. But what does it truly mean to be a parent? Is it about providing, protecting, or preparing a child for the world? Or is it about learning, growing, and evolving alongside them? Our guest this evening, Dr. Ken Resnick, is an educational psychologist and founder of the Smart Choice Parenting Program, established in 2008. The Smart Choice Parenting Program is based on a phenomenal, I'm not tongue twisted, sorry, Mr. Dr. Resnick. A phenomenological approach with an educative method. It's a Friday evening, so you please bear with me, sir. As an educational psychologist at a co-educational school, Dr. Resnick assessed over several hundred learners of varying ages over a period of 13 years. He observed that these learners exhibited the following tendencies: low motivation, lack of perseverance, opting out, fear of failure, and a lack of will to accept a challenge. So we have a true expert on this field, and we're very fortunate and honored to have Dr. Resnick with us as a guest this evening. Now, Dr. Resnick, how would you define parenthood beyond just providing for a child?
All right. I think what we need to first understand what this is all about. So a child is born, they cannot bring themselves up. They're totally dependent on an adult, mainly the parent, to take them into life, to guide them into adulthood, to equip them with a skill that's going to enable them to cope and survive all the mishaps that they're confronted with, all the obstacles they're confronted with, and they cannot bring themselves up. The second thing is that they got a brain. Every human child's got a brain. It's got fantastic potential, but totally dependent on an adult. Usually the parents and the teachers, parents are primary educators, teachers are secondary educators, to get that brain going. So as we can see, because children can't bring themselves up, the parent is the key factor. The parent is the person that is taking them into life. And like any guide, wherever it might be, let's say we all go into the Amazon, we're totally dependent on a guide. If that guide sees something that he doesn't know and panics, the whole group's going to panic. Absolutely. So the same happens with a child. They're born, they believe, they just see their mommy and daddy, they don't really know who they are, but they become totally dependent on that adult parent, and they believe that that parent knows how to do their job. In other words, how to stay calm. So the moment there is screaming, shouting, etc., child doesn't understand, it'll become insecure. So, and when you think about it, in the training of virtually all professionals, this simple common sense fact is neglected. In other words, children are assessed, they put in therapy, they're labeled with all sorts of disorders, and the parents are sort of left out of the picture, especially these days. And there's huge strain because of that with parents. There's a new phenomenon called I just forgot the name now. And we're developing these new labels for kids. And at the end of the day, marriages are taking strain, parents are taking strain, and children are growing up lacking motivation, lacking empathy. They're dependent. They want their own way. They believe they're entitled to all sorts of things, and nobody's actually helping parents. So, and remember, it's not about criticizing parents. We're actually doing a job. That's all it is, but with no job description. And once we can understand that our job, if we knew how to do it, is actually not that difficult. The problem is there is no, I always say it's like baking a cake with we got the ingredients, but no recipe. So we're not going to bake a perfect child, but we can bake a good enough child. And at the end of the day, when things go wrong, to leave the parenting out of the frame is not how it should be. And another important fact which we have to understand, that nothing in our personality is genetic. They've done a lot of research. And a lot of people think, depression's genetic, or ADHD is genetic, or anxiety disorders are genetic. They're not. So once we can help parents understand that they're going on this journey, know how to stay calm, know how to actually help children become independent rather than dependent. And the focus today seems to be more that kids are becoming too dependent because we're doing too much. And that becomes a big problem. And how do we make them independent? So one of the problems that we do have, and we seem to be missing it, many kids, the majority from my experience, are impulsive. They want things yesterday. And I ask professionals, I ask parents, why? Why is that? In our generation, you might have had a few impulsive people, but not like there are today. So an easy answer actually is manners. For instance, if children are born impulsive, if you take a 10-month-old or a year-old that comes to you, you've got something in your hand, they'll grab it. They're not going to ask. So all a parent has to do is say, well, ta, say ta. Kid doesn't want to say ta, they don't get it. If they want to have a cry, they can have a cry, but that's how it works. Once they do say ta, you give them the whatever it is, and then they've got to say ta again. It slows them down. Manners slow kids down. They can't just go to the fridge, switch on the TV when they like, touch other people's property, know what good manners are. It slows them down. And for some reason, we've lost the plot because there are very few kids. You can just go anywhere. Kids of all races, colors, everything. Go to a steakhouse, let's say the Spur. There's chaos there. And at the end of the day, nobody's actually helping parents understand how important it is to slow kids down, because otherwise they grow into adults or teenagers that are very impulsive. They want things yesterday. They get hooked on these games and all of these sort of things. But nobody's actually helping parents understand how important their role is in helping kids, for instance, become less impulsive. Another thing that's happening to a large degree, that there are a lot of kids in all sorts of therapy. And I'm not saying they don't need it, but why do so many kids need it? A lot of kids in speech therapy, for instance. And I also ask a group, why? Simple answer. Kids don't talk. They whine, mumble, and nag. And parents become so used to the whining and the nagging, they don't realize. All the parents have got to say to a child that whines, sorry, my boy, I can't hear you. Do you want to go to your room and practice and then come and ask me properly? Or do you want to ask me properly now? Simple little things parents could do, it makes a difference. So that is our job. We've got to instill in them boundaries. We instill in them, remember, we instill in them our religion, our religious values, our cultural values, their self-esteem, self-motivation, all of these things. It's up to us. And we know how to instill all the religious values, all the cultural values. That's not difficult. And I often say to religious groups, why is that? It's because we start at birth teaching them all our religious values, and they just grow into it. But their behavior, that becomes a problem. We sometimes never start. They run the show. And this is a big problem, and it's changed because of the digital age. And we've got this crazy idea of being there for your child. What does being there for your child mean? Doesn't mean you've got to run around a child. It means that you've got to manage that child. So what is happening, a lot of moms have heard, well, you've got to play with your child. Now, by playing with a child, what happens? They start losing their imagination. A little 5-month-old can sit in a playpen with some blocks, balls, and play and start creating things. But you're getting kids these days saying they're bored. How can a kid be bored? Why are they bored? Because mom's doing too much for them. They won't
Mm-hmm.
play unless mom plays with them. So we've
Yes.
got all of these things that have crept in where parents are getting confused. What is it? And psychology's crept in where, for instance, we can't allow a child to become disappointed. So a child, for instance, at a birthday party, they last in the queue, they miss the last ice cream, and they have a temper tantrum. All of a sudden, they've got to go for therapy for half an hour. We're not letting kids get over things.
Mm-hmm.
Life is about getting over things. We're all going to have
Absolutely.
arguments. It's not easy, but we've got
Mm-hmm.
to move on with a lot of things. Not stop and help try and get the child to not cope with some disappointment. Because I always say life is not about winning, it's about
Mm-hmm.
dealing with disappointment. Because we are
Absolutely.
going to have disappointments in our life. And we're
Mm-hmm.
tending to not allow our kids to become disappointed. So it's all these little things that are creeping in, and nobody seems to be handling it except the focus is on the child. I'll send that kid for an assessment. Let's see what's wrong with him. Let's put him in therapy. Parents are given advice, but often three different professionals will tell parents three different things what they need to do. So we've got those, and what's happening is that things aren't getting better; they're
Mm-hmm.
actually getting worse. And
Now,
and that for me is something that we've got to really change our mindset.
mhm, absolutely. Now, Dr. Resnick, having just said what you did, it's obvious that the role of a parent has changed currently compared to previous generations. Do you know just allude to that for us, please?
Well, if you take way back, there was like children are seen and not heard. There were not the distraction of TV. There was not those distraction of PlayStation. And you must remember, so what has happened? Because parents, there's a lot of pressure. Let's face it. We're all under pressure. Sometimes both parents work. They feel guilty. In our day, things are much slower. You listen to the radio. You knew very little about overseas going on, etc. You had a radio and maybe you had the
Hmm.
newspaper. So there weren't these sort of distractions just to keep kids quiet. And remember, parents are only human beings. And and TV and all the digital games are bad for them. But ultimately, if you're really having a hard time, go and watch TV just to keep them quiet. So the manners we're not teaching. We were taught manners.
Hmm.
Ways would you just go and interrupt a parent having a conversation? Or when they're on the phone, start tugging at them, Ma, and this sort of thing. So
Yeah.
we're missing that plot. And whereas before we knew who mom and dad were, we knew how to respect them.
Hmm.
We knew what our boundaries were. We couldn't just interrupt them while they had their friends there. So, so things were much slower then, and we were able to instill a lot of our values into kids without the distraction. But what is
Hmm.
happening today, because of the distraction of PlayStation and WhatsApp, etc., kids are being exposed to stuff that are horrific. I don't have to tell you. And at the end of the
Absolutely.
day, parents, especially when they become adolescents, have no idea what's going on,
Hmm.
not only on social media, but just what they can pick up on the internet. So this is where it's become, and they're getting exposed to things that they shouldn't be exposed to. The other thing that's happening, which didn't happen before, we used to play in the street. We used to ride our
Yes.
bicycle. We had
Hmm.
friends. Now we're so scared of something happening to the kids, we don't let them leave them at a birthday party. We've got to
Hmm.
sit there with them. Now, what is the problem there? I mean, we got dropped at a birthday party, but if a mom sits there with him, what does the child do? They want to go to the toilet. Mom want to wee. Just grabs mom, and
Yes.
mom's going to take it.
Hmm.
If one instance, if the mom's not there, that little kid has to go and ask Auntie so and so, "Where's the toilet, please?" They've got to stand in a queue to get certain things without mommy standing with them. So at the end of the day, moms are doing too much because kids can do a hell of a lot of things on their own. By the time they're 5, they can do from dressing themselves, from packing their school bag, from making their own lunch. They can do a lot of things. And for
Hmm.
somewhere down the line, you know, and you just got to look around. Moms have become sort of immune. I don't want to blame moms. This is
Of
happening in
course.
families. But
Hmm.
just generally, you just can go anywhere to a supermarket and you see these kids running around. And
Hmm.
there's no consequence. And they stay self-centered. And that was the difference when we were younger. There were
Hmm.
boundaries. There was a
Absolutely.
definite bedtime. There was a definite bath time to
Mhm.
maybe not only they didn't listen to the radio that much, but at the end of the day, keep themselves occupied. We could play with them, but we played for a limited amount of time because
Mhm.
why? They could be creative. They could invent little things. They could draw things. They could pick up fiddlesticks. All of this sort of thing. It's not happening today. Board games are hardly being played.
Mhm.
So all of this is come in, and it's this instant gratification. And the trouble is, parents are being told that there's nothing much they can do. They've got to have this therapy, and of
Mhm.
course, it's quite expensive. But there's
It
no
is.
question. I know that parents are prepared to take responsibility and understand that it's a job and work together. There's definite change.
Now,
And those are the things that worry
mhm.
me because they've
Mhm.
done research. For instance, they found that neuroscience had found that the first 5 years, 90% of the child's wiring takes place in their brain. In other words, they're born there. The moment they active, whoever's interacting with them, the neurotransmitters send the wiring into the brain, and most of
Mhm.
your brain wiring takes place in the first 5 years. It's most active when the kid is 2 or 3. But at the end of the day, the moment they experience what they call maltreatment, parents shouting at them, or 1 minute hugging them, telling them to go, or smacking, impacts on the wiring of the brain. And this is what's happening today. And they're labeling it neurodiverse. That's the name. In other words, these kids all of a sudden are thinking differently and they don't know why. And what I've found that when parents can understand what they got to do in terms of knowing how to stay calm, and what I mean by that, if you take a little baby that's crying,
Mhm.
what calms it down? A soothing voice, a little lullaby,
Yes.
calm
Mhm.
and not shaking the kid or rocking it. So there's
Absolutely.
definitely a connection with a parent and a child. We
Mhm.
got to know how to speak to them, and we're not speaking to them properly today. We're sort of barking
Mhm.
at them most of the time or loving them to bits. And so
Mhm.
many people say, but don't you have to love a child or bond with a child? It happens automatically if you're doing your job. It's not something
Mhm.
that you have to start tap dancing and they'll all of a sudden bond with you. If you're
Absolutely.
calm and a kid respects you and has boundaries, the bonding takes place, the love takes place automatically. Loving doesn't mean you've got to lie in a child's bed and rock them to sleep every night.
Mhm. Mhm.
Let them sit on your lap while you're trying to eat. We get it all wrong in many ways. And
Yes.
that is the problem. So children are in charge in many homes instead of the adults. Because the adult's supposed to be the authority figure in a child's life. I don't mean authoritarian.
Yes.
Person that's guiding the child. And there has to be
Absolutely.
a line of respect between that parent and their child. And respect seems to have gone. So all of these things are breaking down and nothing much is changing because they're doing what they've been doing for the last 20 years in
Mhm.
terms of
Mhm.
assessments, labeling kids being put in remedial classes, all sorts of things. And, when you were growing up, how many kids were in a remedial class? Not too
I
many.
don't know.
All of a
Not too many.
sudden,
I don't know. I don't know if we had a remedial class at the time.
that's
Yeah.
right. And the
Yes.
ones that never coped usually came from very dysfunctional families.
Mhm.
They're
Absolutely.
easy.
Yes.
But I mean, it's and now there's so many kids in remedial. How can that
Mhm.
be? That you've
In
got
fact,
so many kids that don't want to learn maths. They don't want
we
to
have
read.
special remedial schools these days.
Yeah, but even besides that, there are kids that don't want to read.
Mhm.
There's reports now that kids can read, but they don't comprehend in their own language.
Mhm.
Something's
Mhm.
wrong, even when it comes to writing. And I've been in many homes where the kids are lying on the floor doing their homework, lying across the desk. Now,
Mhm.
the next minute, they got what they call scribes. Because the child can't write well, somebody's writing the test for them. So
Wow.
we doing all these crazy things instead of helping parents. When they sit in front of a TV, they must sit up, not stiff, but they can't flop all over the show. It
Mhm.
rubs onto
Mhm.
everything. If you have a look, a child's born with perfect posture. You look at a 10-month-old, they sit up perfectly. What is going wrong that so many of these kids need OT and other sort of therapies? Because they flop and then they whine, then they got attitude, and you got to pick them up. It's crazy. So all of those important things are not being stressed enough to parents. We
Mhm.
got to instill that this is how you do it. It's not difficult if you knew how important all of those things were. Like these games are addictive. it really gives the kids a bit of a high. Well, gee whiz. Now you've got, and I mean, they're a fact of life, but there's got to be a balance.
Absolutely.
They've got to earn PlayStation time by making an effort, whatever extramural they might be doing, make an effort at school, so on. So, and parents just need to understand that they can be given the tools, but they've got the responsibility. They can't just let the kids go for therapy and think that's going to work. And they can sit on their cell phone at home talking while the kids are going mad here, splashing around in the bath, etc. And kids like structure, they like boundaries, they like calmness. So that's what's disappeared. In too many homes, there's too much shouting.
I think, it's obvious that parents play a huge role, in fact, a fundamental role, the most important role in the child's upbringing, in the child's life, and nurturing the style of the child. And I think honing your parental skills are absolutely vital, because I think if one can just work on that, then we can have because unfortunately there's lots and lots of distraction. I mean, you've referred to the digital, the social media, etc., quite a few times during your discussion. And I think that seems to be a huge problem as well. Previously, I mean, we were spending our time in the local municipal libraries, borrowing books, etc. I don't think that exists anymore. So I think that's also a huge problem. But
Yeah.
Dr. Resnick, we're going to have to take an ad break. And before we take an ad break, I just want to remind our listeners that this is an interactive program. We are discussing parenthood. We have an expert, as a guest, Dr. Ken Resnick, who is an educational psychologist. And yep, if you have any questions, you can forward them to us on 060 904 1056. That's via WhatsApp 060 904 1056. We'll take an ad break. We'll continue on the other side of this. Do stay with us.
Durban Halal Meats, your premier source for top quality halal certified meats in South Africa. With over a decade of experience, we deliver succulent lamb, tender beef, juicy chicken, and flavorful mutton to restaurants, caterers, the hospitality industry, and to your table. We're also the first halal butcher for you to shop online. Enjoy competitive pricing and personalized solutions crafted just for you. Find us on durbanhalalmeats.co.za or visit our store at 84 Felix Dlamini Road. Durban Halal Meats, where quality meets trust.
Elegant, stylish, and affordable, Al Noor kurtas are designed to make you feel confident and stylish. With intricate embroidery, vibrant colors, and comfortable fabrics, these kurtas are sure to become your go-to choice for everyday wear and special occasions alike. Visit the Alantar Bookshop at 207 West Road, Overport, or call them on 031-208-1601. Alantar Shop, your one-stop Islamic shop.
Hajj Seminar 2025 will take place on Saturday, the 12th of April at 207 West Road in Overport. Program director will be Hafiz Hussein Wadi. Program commences at 7:15 a.m. and will culminate at Zohar with a scrumptious lunch. That's Saturday, 12th April 2025 at 207 West Road. Proudly brought to you by the Al Ansar Foundation and the Capital Group of Companies.
أحب الوفاء بشتى الصور أحب الوفي الأمين الأغر فأهل الوفاء كلون السحاب وحسن الربيع وماء المطر.
You're listening to Let's Chat on Radio Al Ansar with myself, Faisal MJ Suleiman. We are discussing parenthood, and our special guest this evening is Dr. Ken Resnick, an educational psychologist and founder of the Smart Choice Parenting Program. And Dr. Resnick, just prior to the ad break, we did mention, or I did mention that parents need to adopt the proper parenting styles. Maybe we can use this portion just to discuss different parenting styles and how they shape a child's development, sir.
Okay, pleasure. I think, but before I do that, one of the problems, it seems, in a lot of families is that the dads aren't involved enough. And I think the important thing is that, and with the way kids behaving now, it takes a huge amount of stress. I'm generalizing, obviously. And dads need to be part of the whole thing, especially if they might be tired when they come home from work, but just so that both parents can work on the same page. That's important. So you talk about parenting styles. So neglect is one of a dysfunctional parenting style. In other words, we don't take any interest in the child itself. They go to school. We never attend any meetings. We don't attend any shows that are on at the school. And as long as the kid's out of your hair, they do it. They work at school. Well, we're not even interested. There's no encouragement. So they neglect it. What does that do? What could it do? Can have a child that doesn't feel good about themselves. May not be that well socialized. Teacher starts getting worried. Listen, I think this child needs an assessment. Off they go. Do they ever look at the parenting? Never. The same with a laissez-faire parent where the house is like a circus. Toys lying all over the show, TV blaring, stuff not packed away in the fridge, toys left lying around, etc. Now, the odds are high when one of those kids are sitting in class, structured, having to keep quiet, that they'll be fidgety or looking out the window or distracted, not doing that well. Same thing, parent get a call, listen, we're very worried about your child. We think he might have ADHD. Go for an assessment. Do they look at the parenting? Never. And this is a huge problem because it's totally neglected. The overprotective parent, that is like the murder one offense of parenting, where we bring them up in a bubble. They've just got to listen to what we say. We tell them what they got to wear. We tell them what they got to eat. We don't let them go and play. Or if we let them go and play somewhere, we're phoning 6 times to see if they've eaten, have they drunk enough. They do nothing for themselves. And at the end of the day, what happens? You'll find from my observation, most kids in a remedial school or remedial class are overprotected, where they're just not doing enough for themselves. They're so uncertain. Whenever they do some work, they need help before they've even started. Kids will come home and say, Mom, help me with my maths. And they haven't even opened a book. So we've got that. So that becomes a problem. So there's a term called learned helplessness. And that is all about parenting. In other words, without realizing it, we're encouraging helplessness. What do I mean by that? Especially since COVID. So when kids had to sort of learn online, a lot didn't keep up to scratch. So when they had to start school again, a lot of them didn't want to go. What was the message we gave them? My boy, if you don't understand the work, don't worry. When you come home, somebody will help you. Your pair or whatever. So why should a kid listen? If you know somebody's going to help him, why? He said they're not engaging with the work. They then start believing they can't. They give up. They don't like challenges. They only like doing what they like to do. If they don't want to do it, parents are getting a confused message regarding homework. They're told to sit and do homework for the kids. Definitely not. Kids got to make the effort. The same with reading. I've got a whole approach how we should do reading. And at the end of the day, the kids are not engaging with school. And one of the problems is the fact that their sense of curiosity, which I'll come to just now, I'll just mention 1 or 2 other styles. Then you've got an autocratic parent. I brought you into this world, I can take you out, where they've got to listen or else. Now, the problem with that, with a home that is too autocratic, human beings have always got choice. So what choices does a child have with an autocratic parent? They can either become very timid, yes, mommy, no, daddy, 3 bags full, very passive, become a bit of a doormat, let people take advantage of them as they get older, become empaths where they just want to help the world, don't know how to say no, etc. That's the one side. Or the other choice, where kids are giving the parent the middle finger, in actual fact, where they become rebels or they get involved in antisocial activities. And this becomes a problem. And again, those kids might be assessed, but do they ever call the parent in and ask them? And what does that do often to an autocratic parent? They get more angry with the child. So all of these dynamics, we've got to help parents understand, that we've got to realize that there's just something wrong if things are not working out for the kids. Those are 3 parenting styles, for instance, what I'm telling you. And so there are many more as well. So we've got to just try and understand how important it is that we've got to know the authority figure. We've got a job to do. We're bringing up little human beings that want to go into life and be happy. And we've got to try and equip them with those skills. And it's not a question of parents. It's a question trying to understand why the kid feels like they do, or why they're not motivated, etc.
So So, Dr. Resnick, do you think, or is there a best parenting style, or does it depend on the child's personality?
We
How
develop
would
their
one adopt?
personality.
Mhm.
Sorry, now look, remember, child's personality develops. You're not born with high self-esteem or low self-esteem. You're not born with no motivation or very motivated. That all comes by the encouragement of the parent to do things on their own. And I'll just give you an example. A little case that I had here with a family, and they had the 6-year-old. Now, what I have when parents come and see me with the kids, when I do the structures, I've got a bowl of sweets, those endearments, those easy to open wrappers. Anyway, there was a little 6-year-old, and he wanted a sweet. He whispered to his mom. And I said, no, he's got to ask me. Didn't want to ask me. Fine. But he wasn't getting a sweet. That was it. He walked around the table about 5 times, each time going back to mom and sort of whispering. Sorry, he's got to ask me. He didn't want to ask me. That was fine. But at the end of the session, he sort of mumbles to me, may I have a sweet, please? I said, no, excuse me, may I have a sweet, please? He asks me. Fine, he takes a sweet. And now, what do you say? Thank you. What does he do with the sweet? He gives it to his mom. I said, why are you giving a sweet to your mom? He says, I can't open it. I said, well, put it back. He opened it in 2 seconds. What does he do? What does he do with the wrapper? Gives it to mom. There's the dustbin. So
Yes,
it's all of these things. Kids, why should they do anything? Why should they carry their bag if mom's going to carry them? Why should they walk if mom's going to pick them up, and carry them? So all of these things, we're not encouraging. I've got a little saying, if they can, they must. In other words, if they can eat with a knife and fork, they must. If they can chew with their mouth closed, they must. If they can walk to the toilet alone, they must. So that is what parents have to start, because when kids are scared, come and lie with me, walk with me to the toilet, all of these things are indications that we're just doing too much. And they start becoming anxious. So we've got to help kids become independent. And we can do it by realizing they can do a hell of a lot for themselves with encouragement. And it's about that. And to give you an example, people say, but it's a dangerous world, etc. And I say to parents, your little 6-year-old that's in grade 1, if you're going to go to the stationery shop, mom can have a list of what the child needs, stand at the door, tell the little kid to go and ask the assistant, give him his list, and walk around with the assistant. While the assistant puts whatever, or he chooses the pencil, whatever has to go, and then come to the door and mom will pay. They can do that. And we're not allowing them to do those sort of, or encouraging them. There's a lot of things. We think that there's somebody that's snatching kids on every street corner. Not happening. So we've brought these children into the world. Remember, it's a tough world out there. Not easy. But if we don't give the kids the skills to deal with it, we're in trouble. And we've got to do that from the moment they start becoming aware, and sort of leave them with friends to play. Even if they sleep over, they've got to learn this is how another house works. And if they feel good about themselves, they become well socialized. And then they got manners. They know how to behave in other people's houses. So we can't wait until they're 16. We're going to be in trouble. And that's what's happening. There's a lot of teenage kids, lots of problems. Most teenagers are disconnected with their parents. They're not talking to them. They're just sitting on their cell phone, playing WhatsApp and things like that. And parents don't know what to do about that. And you can't force a teenager to do anything. They've got attitude, got a bit of a locked face. And nobody's saying, but, wow, what is going on here? But the worst part is we've lost our authority and lost respect. And once the kids disrespect you, you're in trouble.
Now, Dr. Resnick, what happens when two parents have conflicting parenting styles? How does this affect a child, and how do the parents reconcile to this?
Okay, and that's what I do. I put parents on the same page because kids are manipulative. They manipulate. They're going to go where they're going to get their own way, and they'll play one parent off on the other. So mom says yes. No, mom says yes. Dad says no. The kid gets his own way. Mom and dad don't talk for a month. The kid's chilled. What parents don't realize, kids are tough. They're born to take on life. So if they've had a screaming match with their mom, mom's now depressed, can't sleep, the little kid wakes up the next morning, he's fine. They don't have guilt. They don't give it on, in terms of worrying about. They want this instant gratification. So the emotions haven't been developed 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, where they can understand empathy. They can understand how do you consider people. Where you can see kids, little 5, 6-year-old, they're all nasty to each other. They call each other names, but they get over it. And if they don't get over it, mom's going to go to the school and want to take the school out, that kid's going to have social problems. So kids are tough. As long as you don't abuse them, they can cope with disappointment. And we've got to try and get them properly socialized so they can behave appropriately wherever they are.
And Dr. Resnick, how does a parent sort of develop a balance between, the effects of social media, the screen time, etc., etc.? How does a parent create this balance?
So the balance has to come with helping kids become responsible. So you've been a 2-year-old, to give a 2-year-old a little cell phone, what we're not understanding is that they've got to only play for maybe half an hour, if the most, because they have found, if you have a look, there's a lot of kids that are wearing glasses. Why? We're born short-sighted. You have a look at a kid anywhere in the state, a little 2-year-old, they've got the phone here, and they play on those phones. So they shouldn't even have a phone at the age of 2. By rights, because what is that? I mean, this is a distraction, but at the end of the day, it's not good for their posture, etc. So we've got to minimize the phone. There's got to be a routine. Only half an hour, then it stops. They hand the phone back. Kid can't be allowed to just have a phone. So we've got to restrict all the social media, the games, the PlayStation games. I mean, they really are. They're brilliant technology, but there's got to be a limit. And I often say to parents, the rule for PlayStation should be when a kid can read, go and do research, find out who invented PlayStation, where are they made, how many do they sell. But the big one, why are they dangerous? Go and do research. When a kid can do that for himself and understand this is how it is, you start limiting it. But if you're going to just give a kid a PlayStation or an iPad, is even worse. They lie all over the show with this iPad. And I mean, it is crazy stuff. And we've got to get them disciplined. If they don't have that, remember, a kid that doesn't have discipline lacks self-discipline when they get older. They find it really hard to go and study. Put something away and really go and study for an hour. They might focus 10 minutes and that's it. So that's very important, because if we haven't had these boundaries, by the time they're teenagers, we've got a big, big problem. Kids will not discipline themselves to put that phone away. They'll and eventually parents give in. And it's a big problem. You've got to start training them from young and introduce it slowly so they know, for instance, time for homework, I need to put my phone away, rather than mom having to say, put your phone away, go and do your work. Once we can get that, and that takes training from a young age.
No, Dr. Resnick, unfortunately, time's running out. And we need to round up. In fact, I was hoping that we're going to pull another 45 minutes on this subject, but it's very interesting, very important, but we will have another opportunity. Maybe very quickly, Dr. Resnick, what are some common parenting mistakes and how can they be avoided?
The most common is they're not teaching kids manners. Parents, you give them that one tip. A kid that can't say please or target doesn't get it. It doesn't get whatever he's asking for. Excuse me, mom. Thanks for dinner, mom. Excuse me from the table. Excuse my fingers. All of these things are important because it slows them down. And they then learn how to have that same attitude when they go into the bigger world. When you go to friends, they know how to behave. They don't just walk into a strange house and start touching things and jumping on the couch. That is the number one thing, that impulsivity. And that is just manners, nothing else. Where parents just got to be aware. Knock on the parents' door. May I come in, please, mom? Sure. Not now. You can talk later. All of this we're not doing. I know I'm generalizing, but the majority of parents are definitely not doing it. So that to me is the number one tip, which is not that difficult to do. And the other one, very quickly, is make sure these kids sit up when they're watching TV. They can't be flopping all over the show. They can't be lying down and having a cell phone up here. We've got to get them to be a bit energetic rather than have all these OT problems, these sensory motor coordination problems. When they do their homework, they've got to try their best. They sit at a desk. and if they're not writing their best, they do it again. So there's quite a lot of, certainly a lot of things that are really important, and it makes a difference because we want kids to feel proud. In other words, if they make the effort, they're rewarded. And now, and we're not making sure they make the effort. So parents got to manage their kids and just let the kid understand. Create that structure.
Dr. Resnick, I want to thank you for joining me in the program this evening. You're always sharing some very sterling advice with us, and I'm sure that our listeners are taking cognizance of what you are, what you have advised us on, and are being inspired by you as well. Dr. Resnick, just to round up, I'm sure you have a message for our listeners. What would be your message?
A message is to understand that it really is up to us to help bring that kid up. And then when their things are sort of going wrong, they've got to start having therapy, and they're not being helped. They need to try and find out, what do I do as a parent? And I would say, realize that it is the parenting. It can't just because they've been told, well, we'll sort your kid out, that parents can now relax, play on the cell phone and not manage their kids. Understand the importance of not saying on your cell phone while you're trying to put your kid to bed. The parents got to put that aside as well. And that we're not their playmates. You've got to encourage kids to finish things. So, and mom and dad need to work together. It's really, really important. That is the number one thing. And but we got to know what we're doing. That's the problem.
Absolutely.
Once we know what we're doing, it becomes easier. And that, unfortunately, parents aren't being helped. And that's to me a big, big problem. We're focusing too much on the child.
Dr. Resnick, thank you very much for joining me in the program, once again. And yes, you have yourself a wonderful weekend, and all the best to you, sir.
Faisal, thank you very much for inviting me. It was a privilege, and have a good evening to you and your listeners.
Thank you,
Thanks
Doctor.
a lot.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you,
We spoke to Dr. Ken Resnick, and he spoke to us about good parenting skills. We will take a short nasheed and ad break, and on the other side of this, we will be talking to Sumaya Umar, a member of the Newcastle Women's Forum, and she'll be talking about the beauty of horse riding in Islam. Do stay with us.